Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 50th part of What If Deku Had a Robot Wolf. I hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 50, Have a Slice. Izumi had a good night's sleep. Which is honestly surprising, what with all the shit she's been through. Multiple villain attacks. The reveal that One for All was a lot more powerful than previously thought. All for One was still alive and backing the League. Someone had an interest in her. The threat of the people who tortured Eri, and fuck knows what else the universe has in store for her. Knowing her luck, she'll end up dealing with terrorists, mind-controlled cultists, PMC goons, and aliens. No, she was not issuing that as a challenge. Anyway, last night was peaceful. Her dream was peaceful, the calm and peaceful cloud realm belonging to the Grand Angel and her fellow angels and one succubus who was still too handsy with her. There was also a new arrival to the peaceful realm, which she needed to try and remember the name of another angel with blue skin who was struggling to learn how to fly. Flying lessons had been going well up until the inventor angel decided to help out by emulating a pre-quirk flash game called Learn to Fly 3 and shoot her out of an overloading nuclear reactor. How that could generate lift without destroying what was being lifted was beyond her. Thankfully, Grand Angel stopped that train before it could even leave the station. Sadly, her time in the realm had to come to an end, and she departed back into the waking world. Izumi's eyes slowly opened, and quickly realized it was a mistake as Nijire's chest was only inches away from her face. Thankfully it was clad in a lacy blue bra. It didn't help that she couldn't move much due to Achiko once again going full koala on her, not helped by Eri also becoming a koala as well. She couldn't blame the girl for copying her. Achiko liked snuggles, and Eri wanted to keep close to Izumi. A sudden loud snore brought her attention behind her. Mei was snoring loudly. Izumi sighed. At least the girl wasn't awake and causing a mess or making something blow up. She had already informed Mei about the quirk emulator, and she took it surprisingly well, if not curious about said emulator. Thankfully, she said that she would not try and develop a quirk emulator of her own, mainly because that was a train of thought she did not want to go down due to just how dangerous the idea of a quirk emulator was. This was somewhat surprising as Izumi didn't think Mei understood what restraint was. Maybe all that time spent comforting her and making her stick to a reasonable sleep schedule was helping. Seeing that everything was fine, she closed her eyes and went back to sleep. Only to be quickly woken up again by a voice she was not expecting. What? When did I get here? Izumi's eyes shot open. She then looked behind her, and yep, there she was. There was Chiharu. Eyes wide open and currently stuck between Mei and Tsu, a deep blush on her face. Hi, Chiharu, Izumi said nervously. What brings you here? I do not know, Chiharu replied. All I remember was coming to your dorm and Mei dragging me off for something. I did not realize that something was Snuggles, she said before she checked Mei, noting that the crazy inventor was holding her tightly. And yes, her hand down Chiharu's shorts. Why is her hand down there? She quietly screamed. You'll get used to it, Izumi said, a slight blush on her face as she was reminded of when she woke up and found her hand up Achiko's shirt. She was just glad that no one was awake to see it. Sadly, she was unaware that Nijire had woken up before her and had snuck in a quick photo. You're sure about that? Chiharu asked nervously as she slowly pulled Mei's hand from her shorts. Which helped relieve her gay panic for a few moments before Mei's hand unconsciously moved upwards and groped her breast. Help! She silently screamed as her face burned. Yes, she knew she was gay. But could the universe give her time to process her gayness fully and properly before shoving female affection onto her like every other hour? Not even her dreams were safe from gay panic, not when she found herself in the clouds trying to fly with feathery wings whilst several hot angels helped teach you how to fly. Or shoot you out of a nuclear reactor. Why? I'm so sorry, Chiharu, Izumi said. I probably should have warned you about her. She's handsy with others and doesn't know what boundaries are. Chiharu noted. We should probably try and get back to sleep, she said before making herself comfortable again. Not easy when someone's groping you. Izumi nodded before letting out a tired sigh. It was still too early for her to get up, so she snuggled back up to Wachiko, trying to ignore Nijire's chest. When morning came, the usual chaos came with it because it was not easy for 9 people to get out of one bed, not helped by the surprise of Chiharu joining them. After Nijire welcomed their new snuggle member, much to Chiharu's embarrassment and panic, they all got ready for the day. Lessons went as they normally did, short homeroom followed by maths, English, modern literature, art history, which, as always, left most of the class flustered, lunch, and then heroics. Heroics was hectic, to say the least. All Might had set up a 5 versus 5 capture the flag battle. Simple enough. One team wins by capturing the opposing team's flag and returning it to their base or by capturing/incapacitating the opposing team. Simple in theory, but kind of a chaotic mess in practice. Izumi was part of the first group, her teammates being Fumikage, Tenya, Kyoka, and Yui. vs Momo, Rikido, Hanta, Su, and Inasa. Needless to say, it was an unfair matchup. Momo and Inasa were by far the strongest members of their class. Yes, Izumi herself was strong, but she was still capped by how much of one for all she could use, which at the moment was about 8%. Plus, there were the additional quirks she had access to, Gearshift and Danger Sense. She was still practicing with them and getting used to using them. But, Izumi only had one for all for only a few months. Momo and Inasa had their quirks for their entire lives and had trained with them for almost the same amount of time. And ever since their internships, the two had only gotten stronger. Inasa, especially since he interned with a hero who knew a lot about controlling wind, allowing him to become much stronger. This left Izumi moving slowly through ground beta whilst avoiding Inasa as he flew around like a goddamn helicopter gunship. Fun. She had no idea how her teammates were doing since she had lost her earpiece after Inasa had separated them. Somewhere along the line, she had been separated from Durandal thanks to another tornado. Right now, she was just trying to survive, stay hidden, and meet up with a teammate. If she could find one. At least thanks to Danger Sense, she could tell where Inasa was, as he was the most dangerous thing out there right now. The problem was it couldn't tell her where everyone else was. She peeked out from a small alleyway, looking for any sign of her classmates. Noticing that no one was around, she bolted across the street and slipped into another alleyway. Moving swiftly and silently through the back alleys. She needed to find someone, anyone. Because right now, she had no idea what was going on. Turning a corner into another side passage, she ran into something and fell backwards onto the floor. Looking up, she realized what she had bumped into. It was one of her classmates, but it wasn't one of her teammates. It was Momo. And she had their flag. Izumi quickly got up, as did Momo, who quickly made a staff and took on a defensive stance. She powered up one for all to 8% and swung her leg towards Momo's head. The other girl dodged the first kick, but the second connected with Momo's head. Sadly, it didn't do much, as her skin turned black, the nanites in her body hardening to tank the damage. Momo quickly retaliated, swinging her staff and keeping Izumi at bay. Izumi was able to avoid a few of the hits, but most were able to connect. There were a few opportunities to strike back, but each time she hit Momo, her nanocore activated and absorbed the impact. This wasn't working. Momo's nanocore made most physical attacks useless, not even her air blasts would do much against the girl. She needed a way to bring her down. Lucky for her, there was one thing she could do that could work on Momo. Izumi had been incorporating more kicks into her new fighting style, dubbed shoot style. As such, she had been examining the fighting styles of other heroes who also predominantly use kicks. One such hero was Mirko, who, thanks to her rabbit mutation, was able to deliver some truly devastating kicks. But there was something else the rabbit hero was known to do, and Izumi, seeing that blunt force trauma wasn't going to do anything, opted to take a page out of the rabbit hero's book. She leapt towards Momo, kicking the staff out of her hands. She then wrapped her legs around the taller girl's neck, using her momentum to bring them both to the ground and started to choke her out between her thighs. The nanocore only helps to protect against physical impacts, not stuff like squeezing or strangulation. Momo grunted as she tried to pull Izumi's legs apart and free herself from her grasp, but to no avail. Her quirk didn't give her super strength like Izumi's did. Her nano core was supposed to help against people with strength quirks. But Izumi, being the adorably cute genius that she was, had found a way around it. It did not help that she had Izumi's bare thighs around her head. Izumi tightened her grip around Momo, using enough force to make sure that she couldn't break free but not too much that she risked causing damage. Hanta suddenly rushed around a corner and noticed them, taking on a combat stance. Izumi quickly looked up at him. "What you looking at?" she asked, not noticing the Merkle-like smirk that was on her face, or the Merkle-like way she said it. Hanta gulped, shot some tape, and promptly Spider-Man out of there. Because he was not crazy enough to deal with that without backup. Nope. Meanwhile, a certain rabbit hero had a feeling someone was doing something she would approve of, but she did not know who or what. Probably nothing, she said before she focused on her current task, crushing a dumbass villain's head between her thighs. Had Momo not had her head scissored between a pair of nice thighs or feeling lightheaded, she would have been disappointed by her teammate abandoning her like that. But since she did have her head scissored between a pair of nice thighs and feeling lightheaded, she couldn't do much else but slowly pass out. The villain team's flag has been captured. All Might announced over the loudspeakers. Hero team wins. Izumi sighed as she released her grip around Momo's head, allowing the girl to breathe normally. Momo instantly rolled onto her back, breathing in deeply. "You okay?" Izumi asked as she moved to check on her. "I'm sorry if my legs were too tight around your neck." They should have been tighter, Momo thought before she shook her head. "I'm fine. Just a bit winded." Izumi let out a sigh of relief before she stood up and offered a hand to Momo. The taller girl slowly took the offered hand and was helped back onto her feet. The two quickly made their way back towards the others. Upon meeting back up with the others and All Might, Izumi could see the state her teammates were in, and they all looked like they had just walked through a Category 10 hurricane. Their hair was a mess. Their costumes were scratched, torn and messed up. Even Durandal looked like he had been thrown around a lot. The other team looked fine by comparison, if a little disheartened that they still lost. Izumi still wasn't sure how they had won yet. There were also the frightened looks everyone was giving Inasa since he clearly displayed unrivaled strength during the lesson. However, Izumi also got a few odd looks, especially from Achiko and Himiko. She was not sure why. Now then, before we go on to discussing what you all did, do any of you have any questions? All Might asked. I have one, Izumi said, raising a hand. How did we win? It is quite simple, Fumikage said. After Inasa scattered us, we realized that the surface was too dangerous to move around safely. We descended into the dungeons that lay beneath the city to move around unseen. He means we entered the sewers, Dark Shadow added. We were able to sneak underneath the other team's base, nab the flag, and bring it back to our base. Rib bit. I told you guys we should have someone in the sewers, Sue said. Momo sighed. Yeah. Sorry about that. I thought the traps I had placed would be enough. Guess I was wrong. Yeah, we just smashed through the floor of the building the flag was in, Dark Shadow said. Indeed. All Might said. Young Fumikage and Dark Shadow were able to traverse unopposed, giving them free rein to take the opposing team's flag and bring it back. Remember, there are always multiple ways to complete an objective. Always be prepared to deal with unexpected approaches. He said. Now then, any other questions? I have one, Momo said before turning towards Hanta. Why did you run away instead of helping me whilst Izumi was crushing my head between her thighs? What? Sue said, sounding surprised, her lower hands making grabbing motions. I'm sorry, but did you see the grin on Izumi's face? Hanta asked. I turned that corner and saw Izumi with the most sinister Merkle-like smirk on her face I have ever seen, choking you out between her thighs. I was not ready to deal with Mirko today, especially after the what you looking at response she gave me. What? Izumi said, looking surprised. Was she grinning like Mirko whilst she was choking Momo? She did realize that her response to Hanta when he showed up was a bit harsh, but Mirko-like? That wasn't her, right? Izumi, do not try to deny that you were like Mirko back there, Himiko said. We all saw you go all Mirko on Momo's arse, she said. Why couldn't I have been the one whose head got squeezed by her thighs? She thought, which was mirrored by Achiko and Tsu. And Izumi once more proves to the world that she is a bunny, Mina remarked. And here I thought she was an All Might fangirl, Toru added. Izumi started to blush before quickly putting her respirator on to hide her blush. Sadly, without her hood, she couldn't entirely hide her face. Maybe she had been watching too much of Mirko as of late. Might want to avoid watching her on HeroTube for a while. The last thing she wants to do is be too much like Mirko. The rest of the lesson went on as usual. The other two teams had their match, which went much better than theirs. Neither team had a bloody attack, and Asa flying around and harassing them. It was wait? Who gave Himiko a bloody 3D maneuver gear? Why was that even allowed? Well, someone looks like she's having fun. Once the lesson was over, they went to get changed, but partway through, there was an announcement school-wide informing all students to make their way to the auditorium. Not knowing why they were being called, the students of 1A quickly changed back into their school uniforms before heading towards the auditorium. Why do you think we're being called to the auditorium? Nito asked as the class made their way to the hall, gradually meeting up with more students as they walked. No idea, Momo replied. But if they're calling the entire school to the auditorium, then there must be something important the teachers need to tell us. Must be big then, Ijiro said. Wonder what it's about. We'll have to wait and see, Hitoshi said before she turned towards Himiko. So, Himiko, who gave you permission to use a 3D maneuver gear from Attack on Titan? He asked with a tired frown. That would be me. Mei said with a smile. She asked, so I delivered. Of course it was Mei who made that for you, Hitoshi said. Why is it always Mei? The class soon entered the auditorium and sat down with the other students. It would still be a while before the entire student body sat down, so the class idly chatted in the meantime. Well, everyone save for Izumi. She was thinking about something that had been bothering her since she had met Rolls. The similarity of her power to Eri's non-quirk abilities. Rolls was wise to keep her distance from Durandal. She probably found out about the emulator from Izumi's mind. And for the most part, she was successful. Save for one time when she walked into Izumi's room. Durandal was able to make physical contact with her, and sure enough, there wasn't anything to emulate. She was biologically quirkless. And yet, she had powers, strong ones at that. Telepathy, telekinesis, mind reading. A rather powerful combination. Was there a connection between Rolls and Eri? At first, she thought the two were related somehow. Still, she couldn't find anything on Eri's biological parents other than her dad having been rewinded into nothing and her mother abandoned her to the Shai Hasaikai. On the other hand, Rolls still had both her parents, but her dad is never around, and her mother is a no-show. There's also her sister, but her mother's dead. Also, Rolls is British and couldn't read Durandal's mind, whilst Eri is Japanese and can read the robot's mind. So no link there. So, more of these psychics had to be out there with different variants. And what a terrifying thought that was. Rolls was clearly a pure blood of sorts, probably. She had no quirk but had psychic powers and the toe additional joint. So, whatever she was a pure psychic. On the other hand, Eri had to be some sort of hybrid. She had both a quirk and psychic powers, so one of her parents had to have these psychic powers as well. She just didn't know which one. She didn't know how these psychics came about, and it was unlikely Rolls would tell her. So, either they were some secret second branch of human evolution that's evolving alongside those with quirks, or there's something else going on. Honestly, she didn't know if this was a rabbit hole she wanted to go down, to be honest. Also, she didn't know who Roll's sister was. All she knew was that she was a pro hero operating somewhere in the world, and that's it. She's probably a British hero. She was brought out of her musing by someone coughing into a microphone. Everyone looked towards the podium to see Eraserhead standing behind it, looking like he didn't want to be there. All right. You all might be wondering why you've all been called here. Or why I'm the one talking to you, Eraserhead said, looking as tired as always. To answer the latter, Nizu and Horigaramu are busy right now. So, you're left with me, he said, looking exceptionally tired. Anyway, as you all know, the League of Villains attacked UA several months ago, Eraserhead continued. Since then, we've been working alongside other heroes with the investigation into the League. But, it's not just Japan who are now interested in the League, he said before gesturing beside him. A spotlight then shined from above, revealing a woman standing close to the podium, standing at attention. The woman in question was of average size with a sizable bust. She had cyan blue hair and red eyes. She wears a sleeveless dark gray jacket over a sleeveless light gray shirt with a black tie, fingerless gloves, black combat boots, and thigh-high stockings. There was also a 15 cm SIG-33 on her back. Something Izumi only recognized, as only one hero in the world had that particular piece of artillery on their back. This is Dorothy Kunich, also known as the Pro Hero Grill, Eraserhead said. She's here on behalf of the German government to help the investigation into the League of Villains. She's also Germany's best death dagger, so don't piss her off, okay, he explained. To those of you who don't know what a death dagger is. They're heroes who are permitted to use lethal force against villains, unlike regular heroes who can only use lethal force either as a last resort or the villain in question is death-marked. Izumi gulped. She knew much about Grill, mostly because she appeared in Blood and Iron, Heart and Soul. Eraserhead wasn't lying when he said she was Germany's best death dagger. She was responsible for the deaths of some of the worst villains in Europe, including Dr. Necro. She was ruthless. She was dangerous and utterly ruthless. Due to there being things related to the League that are of interest to them, we will be cooperating with the German government for this investigation. I expect all of you to dash, Eraserhead said before he heard snoring behind him. He slowly turned towards Grill and had to look down. He found the woman fast asleep inside one of his sleeping bags, resting her head on a soft white pillow. Everyone in the auditorium sweat dropped. This was Germany's best death dagger? The woman who killed Dr. Necro and ended his zombie army. The woman with the single highest number of villains killed in the world. The woman rumored to have killed a resurrected Hitler and demanded pie because of it. Was currently fast asleep in front of the entire student body of UA. Anyone else notices how adorable she is? Mina asked quietly. Eraserhead let out a loud, done-with existence sigh. I'm not paid enough for this, he muttered before focusing on the students before him. As I was saying, I expect all of you to cooperate with her investigation. Failure to do so will be punishment in of itself. There were a few murmurs from the students. They were all curious about why the German government was interested in the League. But none of them were going to get in the way, even if the hero they weren't supposed to get in the way of in the first place was currently fast asleep. Some of you may be wondering why Germany is interested in the League of Villains, Eraserhead continued. Well, they're not. They're interested in who's been making the League's Nomu. They have reason to believe that whoever made these Nomu were involved in several other incidents, such as the Long Island Massacre, the Dr. Necro incident, the Kremlin bombings, the Dark Rain incident, and the Mutator attack. There was a large number of gasps from the student body. Those with mutation quirks looked especially worried, as all those attacks in question caused those with mutation quirks to mutate horrifically. And those who had survived Mutator, well, they were the worst affected. Ibero was rapidly making the sign of the cross, a horrified look on her face. Sue, meanwhile, had it worse. She was shivering badly, her arms wrapped around her body and biting her lower lip. Izumi swore she saw shark teeth. Himiko, who was sitting next to her, was quick to react and hugged her gently, making sure that she was okay. Izumi scowled. She could already tell where this was going. The Long Island Massacre was one of Avalon's most vicious attacks. One so barbaric that Paxton himself had the entire bioweapons division dissolved and killed because of it. If that attack had something to do with Mutator and the Nomu, then someone from that division survived and was now assisting the League in making these Nomu. Eraserhead continued to speak, but Izumi wasn't paying attention anymore. She was more focused on Sue. The news that someone else was behind Mutator would no doubt be horrifying to the girl. Previously she had been safe and secured in the knowledge that Mutator was dead, that no one else could mutate. But the Nomu, also showing signs of mutations, shook her to the core. And now, with the revelation that Mutator was nothing more but a pawn of someone else, her safe worldview was shattered. She was no longer safe from mutating further. No one was safe from mutating. And it horrified her. Izumi frowned. Sue was going to need a lot of comforting after this. Don't worry, Sue. I promise we will help you get through this. And I will protect you from whoever's behind this. Meanwhile, somewhere in Russia, a long train was quickly making its way across the Russian countryside. The track was surrounded on both sides by snow-covered forests. It was a mixed train. A mix of freight and passenger carriages. Each carriage had the emblem of the PMC raft on it. Inside one of the frontmost passenger carriages, raft operative Kainlin was guarding a vital asset. Said asset sitting opposite him. Kane was a large, well-built man with gray skin, short brown hair and sharp blue eyes. He was wearing black military fatigues and combat boots. Before him sat a more petite man with brown hair and eyes, wearing a simple white shirt, black trousers, and red shoes. Kane usually wouldn't like having to escort a quirkless man. Those without quirks were a dying breed and destined for extinction. But the man who sat before him may look quirkless, but oh boy, he wasn't, if the 20 men he managed to kill by snapping their necks without ever touching them was to go by. Or the fact that he could read the minds of everyone around them. And don't get him started on that little toy he brought with him because he couldn't wait to bring that back to Japan. The bigwigs back at Raft High Command and the HPSC would just love to get their hands on that bad boy. Once they get it back to Japan, that is, with the man who gave it to them. Because right now, he's the only one who can use it. He wasn't really a supporter of Japan's HPSC's plan to restore the status quo of Japan to pre-Avalon war conditions. He was just here to get paid. But he wasn't going to try and stop it. He didn't much care what the two organizations were doing. As long as he got paid, he'd be fine. He also did not know why the man opposite him wore red shoes when he clearly had a quirk, a powerful one at that too. But it wasn't his place to ask. If the guy wanted to be mistaken for quirkless, then that's his problem. So, the man before him asked, who liked to be called Zack, said, "How long left till we reach Japan?" Kane looked down at his watch. "It'll be another day. It's a long trip, not a quick one by train. But a lot safer than air travel. Especially with that toy of yours." "Oh, believe me, your superiors will be getting far more than that little toy," Zack said. "Once my safety has been ensured, I can provide you people with gear and equipment that will seem like magic. Don't worry. Once we get to Japan, you will be more than safe," Kane said. "Well, I hope you're right," Zack said. "I have some very powerful people after me. They are very persistent." "Don't worry, only a fool would attack our Japan base," Kane said with a smile. "That base is impenetrable." "Nothing is impenetrable," Zack said. "Especially in this age of quirks. With the right combination of quirks, you can break into anything. And don't get started on the advancements of technology that have been evening the score. Don't worry, we're more than prepared to deal with any kind of intruder," Kane said. "As is this train dash," he said before he shunted forwards as the train's emergency brakes kicked in. "What was that?" he asked, sounding concerned as the train continued to slow down before coming to a complete stop. "Something's wrong," Zack said. "There's a train blocking the tracks." "Shit," Kane cursed. He wasn't going to question how Zack knew that. He was a telepath, after all. But if another train was blocking the way, they could not proceed. Follow me. We may need your help, he said as he got up and rushed to the nearest door, quickly followed by Zack. The two quickly made their way out of the train and onto the ground below. They quickly rushed down the train towards the other train blocking the way. It wasn't a regular train, it was a full-on freight train, and someone had attacked the engine but left the carriages intact. What the hell happened here? One raft soldier asked as they examined the train. Looks like someone did a number on the train engine, another soldier remarked. Well, this complicates things, Zack remarked as they walked along the train. Indeed it does, Kane said, sounding annoyed. We can't continue forwards until we deal with this train, which we can't do because the engine's been destroyed, he said before directing people to examine the train. Something's wrong, Zack said, looking nervous. There was another like me here. What? Kane asked, sounding surprised. Come now, did you really think there's only one of me? Zack said with a slight smirk. Of course, there are more people like me. I'm not one of a kind. One of them was on this train. So, there's a body out there? Kane said, noting that this could be an opportunity they could use to their advantage. After all, a few members of Raft's science division wanted to dissect the guy, so having another body available to them would be useful. Don't bother looking for it. It's gone, Zack said before he walked towards one of the freight cars. It's been destroyed. Only atoms remain. Yes, I can rip someone apart at the atomic level. It's not hard to do. Kane looked concerned. So there were two more people like you here, and one killed the other and destroyed the body. Why? To remove the evidence, Zack replied as he approached a container. Don't worry. We shouldn't have to worry about the survivor. He's long gone by now, he said before he opened the container. Kane looked into the now open container and was shocked by what he saw. People. Men and women wearing Hummerai's robes just stood there, unmoving and unresponsive. Standing shoulder to shoulder and packed together. What the fuck? Kane cursed as he took a step back. They're brain dead, Zack said. All of them are, he said before he jumped down and took a few steps back from the train. Every carriage is packed full of them. All of them? Kane said before he looked up and down the train. But there are over 40 carriages. They can't all be full of people. And why brain dead? They are. And from all over Europe. Guess someone was gathering their members and wanted to transport them somewhere, Zack said. As for being brain dead. Do you remember a villain from a few years back? Puppeteer, he called himself. Yeah. I remember the guy, Kane replied. He could control other people like puppets. He said that it was easier to control those who were brain dead as there was nothing to fight against. Yep, that's the guy, Zack said. This is just the same thing, but on a much larger scale. Mindless, soulless puppets. Guess some of my more radical brethren are taking things a bit too extreme. More radical brethren? Was he part of a cult or something? So they're all puppets then, Kane said, getting a nod from Zack. Well, that would explain why Hummerai's has done a complete 180 in terms of belief. Another guy like you is controlling them. Jesus, what the fuck are you people capable of? A lot, Zack replied. Don't worry. I won't do something like this. I'm from a less radical branch. I wouldn't do anything like this without a good reason to. And even then, only a few people, not to this scale. The guys behind this, however, are a lot more forceful with their ideals. Kane nodded. He was grateful that this guy was more reasonable. He wouldn't want to meet one of these radical guys. Sir. A soldier said as he rushed over to them. We found these, sir, he said before he passed Kane several red needles. They were all over the train. Needles, huh? Kane said, examining the needles. You recognize them? Zack asked. Kane nodded. I do. We had records of other attacks like this one, with red needles found everywhere. No idea who's responsible, though, he said before he looked up at the soldier who gave it to him.
Is there any way we can move the train?
Negative, sir, the soldier replied.
The train's toast. We'll need to call for another train to pull it for us.
And it'll take days to get here. Or you could just ask me to throw the entire thing off the rails, Zack said with a smile.
You can do that?
The soldier asked.
Of course, I can, Zack replied. But I would recommend bringing everyone to our side of the train so that I don't accidentally crush them beneath a carriage.
Kane nodded before he recalled all raft personnel outside their train to their side of the Hummer-Ice train. Once everyone was on the safe side of the train, Kane stepped away from Zack. Alright, whenever you're dash, he said before Zack casually waved his hand, and the entire Hummer-Ice train was pushed off the rails and deposited safely away from the tracks.
Jaws dropped.
Even Kane was amazed by the display of power. The entire train, over 40 carriages and one engine, pushed off the rails in one go.
And Zack? He didn't look tired or worn out from that display of strength. If anything, the way he did it made it look trivial. Just how powerful was this guy? Kane smiled. With someone this powerful working with them, they would be unstoppable. The HPSC's dream would be within their reach.
Hell, not even All Might could stop someone with this power, not when Zack can snap someone's neck with but a thought. Well then, Zack said as he turned to face Kane. I believe we can proceed dash, he said before something shot out from beneath one of the now upturned carriages and latched onto his chest. A small metal device the size of a hand grenade.
What the? He said, sounding confused, before the device beeped.
Kane quickly raised his arms in front of him, and metal plates formed out of them, forming a shield in front of him. He knew a bomb when he saw one. Shockingly, he didn't hear a loud bang, just a small one followed by the visceral sound of flesh being torn asunder and the feeling of several small blades embedding themselves into his shield. He peeked out from behind his shield and saw only bloody carnage. Zack was dead, his body sliced up by hundreds of tiny blades, leaving nothing but meaty chunks.
And he wasn't the only one. Several raft operatives were caught in the swarm of razors, ripping them apart as well.
Most of those who were hit died, but a sorry few were still alive, missing chunks of their bodies and crying out in pain. Someone was crying out for a medic, but no standard medical aid would help these men, not after being torn apart like that. Kane could only look on in shock at Zack's remains. A man so powerful, killed by something so simple. How could that be? That man was a powerhouse, an unstoppable juggernaut. How could such a simple device kill someone so powerful? A device that latched only onto him and only after he used his powers. Oh shit! Kane had no time to yell before red razor-sharp needles shot out from the forest behind him. He could only turn around quickly and block them with his shield. His comrades, however, didn't have the same luck and were quickly torn to shreds by the large volley of needles. Once everyone outside of the raft train was dead, whoever was attacking them switched to attacking the train, sending hundreds of red needles towards it that ripped straight through the engine and passenger cars, killing all those still inside.
Kane cursed loudly. It was an ambush, and Zuck had sprung the trap. Someone knew Zuck was on board the train and set a trap for him.
As well as whoever was like him that was on the train before them. And now they were removing any witnesses. Something suddenly hit his shield, sending him staggering back and splitting the shield into two. He barely had any time to properly identify the threat before two red blades stabbed at him. He blocked both and jumped back, allowing him to identify his foe. Before him was a young woman with a very curvy body. She had blue eyes, full glossy lips, and straight, shiny red hair that looked well cared for. She wore a pale purple blouse with frilled cuffs, its collar upturned. A short, navy blue dress with a low collar, a thick brown belt, dark red gloves, purple thigh-high socks, a pair of black boots with knee-high protrusions, and a black domino mask over her eyes. There was also a pearl string necklace around her neck, with a gemstone that he didn't recognize hanging from it. It was pinkish-brown and was cut into an odd 9-point star. As well as a black choker with a small red circle in the middle. There was an emblem in the circle, but he couldn't tell what it was.
Who the fuck are you? Kane demanded with a scowl.
The woman before him chuckled haughtily. You can call me Slice, the woman replied before thin, metal claws unsheathed from the fingertips of her gloves, and her hair also solidified into sharp blades.
Kane was impressed.
This woman had quite a powerful quirk.
He'd almost be offering her a position in Raft if she didn't kill all of his men and a vital asset under his protection.
He charged forwards and swung one of his shield segments towards Slice, but she acrobatically dodged out of the way, sending several hair blades his way. He had to use his other shield to protect himself from them.
Why are you here?
Kane demanded as he swiped at Slice several more times.
Why did you attack us?
Slice chuckled as she skipped over him. Apologies, but for a dead man walking, you don't need to know that, she said, slicing at his shields as she leapt over him again and again.
Kane was starting to get furious.
This bitch was getting on his nerves. Once he was done beating this shit out of her as well as finding out why she attacked them, he was going to teach her a lesson. I'd like to see you try, Slice taunted as she jumped over him again, sliding into his left arm whilst Kane managed to get a swipe in. He was really starting to get pissed off.
Slice chucked haughtily. For a PMC grunt, you have terrible accuracy.
You couldn't hit the broadside of a bar dash, she said before a strand of red hair fluttered in front of her.
Kane smirked. Who can't hit shit now, bitch?
He said before he took on an offensive stance, ready to give her a piece of his mind.
Slice watched the single strand of hair float down before looking back up at Kane with a furious scowl.
You bastard! She screamed, her blue eyes flashing red momentarily before blades of hair shot forwards towards Kane. He didn't have time to raise his shields to block the attack before his head was bisected by one of the blades, followed by his arms and legs.
His remains were then impaled with extreme prejudice and unnecessary amount of times.
Once Slice was done reducing Kane's body to shredded meat, she recalled her hair blades and dehardened her hair.
She then took a few deep breaths to calm herself down.
Like her mother used to say, she inherited her grandmother's hair-triggered temper. Once she was sufficiently calmed down, and checked that her hair was alright, Slice approached the raft train, specifically aiming for the cargo carriages, one carriage in particular. A single gunshot rang out, forcing her to stop. Slice turned towards the source of the gunshot, finding a lone surviving raft operative lying on the ground with a missing leg, pointing his sidearm at her. The man fired several more times, unloading the entire clip and pulling the trigger long after running out of ammunition. Once his brain finally caught on that he was out of bullets, he stopped pulling the trigger. He focused his gaze on Slice and was horrified to see that she was unharmed, which should have been impossible since all of his bullets should have hit her. She was standing still and wasn't using her hair as a shield.
They should have hit.
He looked closer towards her, and a horrified look appeared on his face.
The bullets had been on target.
They had hit her. Well, they would have, had they not stopped a few inches away from her and were now floating inches away from her body. Slice gave the man a haughty smirk before whipping her hair and sending forth a wave of needles, impaling the man and turning him into a pincushion. She then released her mental grip on the bullets, letting them fall onto the floor. Once he was dealt with, Slice continued down the train, using her hair to kill anyone who miraculously survived her opening bombardment. Not that many did, and very few of them were in a state to fight back.
No witnesses.
She briefly thought back to the asset Raft was protecting and the woman like him on the Hummer ice train. She expected a lot more out of these people, yet they both fell for her little traps.
She smirked. Mother's not going to protect them now.
Not that she ever did so in the first place. After a bit of walking, she finally reached the carriage she was looking for, the most secure freight carriage in the entire train. It was much larger than the others.
Stronger too.
It was built to be able to withstand a nuke. And the lock on it was the most secure long Raft could get their hands on. Lucky for her, she had a handy skeleton key that should help her crack it. She jumped onto the carriage, placed the device onto the lock, and activated it. 2 seconds later, the device pinged, and the lock opened.
2 seconds.
Slice gasped.
2 seconds. That's how long it took to unlock it. The most secured lock on the planet,"
she said, flabbergasted by how easy it was to unlock the cargo container. "I wouldn't trust this thing to protect my porn stash, let alone whatever the hell you guys put inside this thing," she said before sighing.
"Oh well, let's see what you lot got your hands on."
She reached forwards with her hair and threw the door open, allowing her to gaze upon the container's contents. Her jaw dropped as a light blush formed on her face.
"Well, hello there, you big, beautiful boy," Slice cooed, licking her lips.
A single red light looked back at her from the darkness of the container.
"Let's take you out for a spin."
That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 51.
If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.